The sheriff's boots crunch on broken concrete as Karen stands behind him, arms crossed, vindication blazing in her eyes. That's him, officer. The one who destroyed property values and traumatized my children. But what she doesn't know none of them knows that the pool she's so desperate to resurrect holds a secret that will shatter more than just neighborhood peace. When the truth surfaces, Karen's victory lap with the sledgehammer felt heavier than it should have in Marcus. Chen's weathered hands, 43 years old, shoulders broad from 2 decades of construction work. And here he stood in his own backyard at dawn, preparing to destroy the one thing his daughter Emma had loved most in this world. The in-ground pool stretched before him like a wound in the earth 15 feet by 30 feet of cracked concrete and stagnant water that had turned the color of old tea. What had once been Emma's summer sanctuary now looked like a monument to neglect, its tile border chipped and stained, the diving board hanging at an awkward angle where one of the support bolts had finally given way. Marcus wiped sweat from his forehead despite the morning chill. October in suburban Phoenix meant the temperature would climb past 90 by noon. You don't have to do this alone, Dad. At 19, not until 10. Jake set his mug on the patio table and rolled up his sleeves. Emma would want us to do this together. The mention of Emma's name hit Marcus like a physical blow. 3 months since the accident, and he still expected to hear. Her voice, calling from the pool, still caught himself buying her favorite cereal at the grocery store. The grief counselor said it would get easier. But the counselor hadn't lost a 16-year-old daughter to a drunk driver on a Tuesday night. In July, your mother thinks I'm losing my mind, Marcus said, though he made no move to stop Jake from picking up a pickaxe from the tool pile. Mom thinks a lot of things. Jake's voice carried an edge of bitterness that had become familiar since the funeral. It doesn't mean she's right. Sarah had been vocal about her opposition to filling in the pool. It's too soon, she'd argued during their last fight, which had ended with her sleeping in the guest room for the 4th night in a row. Emma loved that pool. You're erasing her memory. But Marcus knew better. Every time he looked out the kitchen window and saw that empty expanse of water, he saw Emma's ghost doing backflips off the diving board, heard her laughter echoing off the concrete. The pool wasn't preserving her memory, it was torturing him. With it, the first swing of the sledgehammer sent vibrations up his arms and into his chest. The impact left a spiderweb of cracks in the shallow end's wall, concrete dust puffing into the morning air. It felt good, destructive and clean and purposeful in a way nothing had felt since the funeral. Easier than I thought it would be, Jake said, attacking the coping stones with his pickaxe. Guess all that water damage really did a number on the structure. They worked in rhythm, father and son, united in destruction. The sun climbed higher, and sweat began to darken their shirts. Marcus had just paused to drink from his water bottle when he heard the voice that could turn a perfect morning into a perfect storm. Excuse me, her perfectly manicured hands gripping the wooden slats like she was trying to shake them loose. At 45, Karen maintained the kind of aggressive fitness that came from expensive personal trainers and a deep-seated need to control everything around her, including her neighbors. Her platinum blonde hair was pulled back in a ponytail, so tight it seemed to lift her eyebrows, and she wore workout clothes that probably cost more than Marcus made in a week. What exactly do you think you're doing? She demanded, her voice carrying that particular shrillness that had earned her the neighborhood. Nickname even her own teenage kids used behind her back. Marcus set down his sledgehammer and walked to the fence, Jake following close behind. Morning, Karen. Just doing some home improvement? Home improvement. Karen's voice climbed an octave. You're destroying that beautiful pool. Do you have any idea what this is going to do to property values? It's my property, Marcus said, fighting to keep his voice level. And my pool. That pool has been the centerpiece of this neighborhood for 15 years. Karen gestured wildly. With one hand while maintaining her death grip on the fence with the other, my children learned to swim in that pool. Half the kids on this street have birthday party memories in that pool. Mrs. Whitfield, Jake said, his voice deadly quiet, that's our pool, in our yard, Karen snapped, and the words hit the air like a slap. The sledgehammer was back in Marcus's hands. Before he realized he'd picked it up, Jake's face had gone white, then red, his fists clenched at his sides. You need to leave, Marcus said, his voice barely above a whisper, but carrying enough menace to make Karen take a step back from the fence. I don't think so. Karen pulled out her phone, her fingers dancing across the screen. I'm calling the city. I'm calling the HOA. You can't just destroy major landscaping features without permits, without environmental impact studies, without community input. Community input. Jake laughed, but there was no humor in it. Lady, this isn't a democracy. It's our backyard. Everything we do affects the community, Karen shot back. And I'll be damned if I'm going to let you drag down everyone's property values because you can't handle your grief like a mature adult. The sledgehammer left Marcus's hands before conscious thought could stop it. It didn't hit Karen. He wasn't that far gone, but it struck the fence between them with enough force to send splinters flying and leave a sledgehammer-shaped dent in the wood. Karen screamed and stumbled backward, landing hard on her perfectly manicured lawn. Her phone flew from her hand, skittering across the grass. Dad! Jake grabbed Marcus's arm, pulling him back from the fence. Karen scrambled to her feet, grass stains on her expensive workout clothes, her face flushed with outrage and something that might have been fear. You're insane. You could have killed me. I hit the fence, Marcus said, but his voice shook slightly. The rage had come from somewhere deep and primal, a place he didn't recognize in himself. Threatening behavior. Karen retrieved her phone, checking the screen for damage. Destruction of property. I'm calling the police. Karen, please. Marcus tried, but she was already dialing. Yes, I need to report a dangerous neighbor, she said into the phone, her eyes never leaving Marcus's face. He just attacked me with a sledgehammer. Yes, I'll hold. Jake moved to stand beside his father, both of them watching Karen pace her backyard, while she gave her statement to whatever dispatcher had answered her call. Marcus could feel his heart hammering against his ribs, could taste copper in his mouth. She's really doing it, Jake said quietly. Yeah. Marcus set the sledgehammer down, his hands shaking slightly. She really is. 20 minutes later, a sheriff's department cruiser pulled up in front of the Chen house. Its light barred dark, but its presence unmistakable. Someone who'd grown up in the neighborhood before becoming a cop. Karen appeared at her gate like she'd been waiting, which she probably had. She'd changed into a business suit and reapplied her makeup, transforming from suburban fitness enthusiast to professional victim in record time. That's him, Deputy Alvarez, she said, pointing at Marcus with the kind of theatrical gesture usually reserved for courtroom dramas. The one who threatened me with a deadly weapon. Rick approached the fence slowly, his expression carefully neutral. Morning, Marcus. Jake. He nodded to both of them. I'm going to need to hear your side of this. I hit the fence, Marcus said simply. Not her, the fence. With a sledgehammer, Karen interjected. While I was standing right there, it was clearly intended to intimidate and threaten me. So, technically, you damaged your neighbor's property, Rick said, though his tone suggested he wasn't particularly impressed by the technicality. Are you going to arrest him or not? Karen demanded. Because I have video of the whole thing. She held up her phone triumphantly. Rick's eyebrows rose. Video? I started recording when I realized how unhinged he was becoming. You can clearly see him threaten me with that weapon. Let's have a look, Rick said, though Marcus could see. Reluctance in the deputy's posture. Karen played the video, which began rudely. The Maricopa County Sheriff's Office holding cell smelled like disinfectant and desperation. Marcus sat on the concrete bench, his head in his hands, trying to process how quickly his morning had gone from therapeutic destruction to criminal charges. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead with the kind of persistent buzz that made you question your sanity after the first hour. Chen, you made bail. Marcus looked up to see Sarah standing beside the sergeant's desk, her dark hair pulled back in the messy bun she wore when she was stressed, her scrubs wrinkled from her overnight shift at the hospital. Even exhausted and angry, she was still the most beautiful woman he'd ever seen, though the fury in her brown eyes suggested romance was the last thing on her mind. 24 hours, she said as they walked to her Honda Civic. I've been gone 24 hours, and you get yourself arrested. Sarah, I can explain, can you? She slammed the car door harder than necessary. Because Jake's version involves you attacking our neighbor with a sledgehammer, and honestly, Marcus said, sounds exactly like something you'd do these days. The drive home was tense and silent, Phoenix traffic crawling past in the afternoon heat. Marcus watched familiar landmarks slide by the strip mall where Emma had gotten her ears pierced. The school where she'd played JV volleyball, the intersection where she'd died on a Tuesday night in July. The lawyer says it's a misdemeanor, Sarah said finally. Criminal damage, disturbing the peace. You'll probably get community service and anger management. I don't need anger management. Sarah's laugh was sharp and humorless. You attacked a fence with a sledgehammer because Karen Whitfield hurt your feelings. She said I couldn't handle my grief like a mature adult. Can you? The question hung between them like a loaded gun. Marcus stared out the passenger window, watching suburban Phoenix blur past in waves of heat distortion. When they pulled into their driveway, Marcus's stomach dropped. A white city pickup truck sat in front of their house, its official seal, glinting in the afternoon sun. A woman in a hard hat and safety vest was taking photos of their backyard, while Karen Whitfield stood nearby, gesticulating wildly and pointing at the half-destroyed pool. Building Inspector Sarah said grimly. Jake texted me. Showed up an hour after you got arrested. They climbed out of the car just as Karen spotted them. She strode over with the confidence of someone who held all the cards. Marcus, so good to see you're out of jail. Her smile was razor sharp. I hope you're ready to discuss this situation like rational adults. What situation? Marcus said, though he could see the answer in the inspector's clipboard and Karen's triumphant expression. Well, it turns out that major landscaping modifications require city permits, Karen said, pulling out a thick folder. Environmental impact assessments, soil compaction studies, drainage analysis. You can't just fill in a pool because you feel like it. The building inspector, a middle-aged Latina woman, whose name tag read M. Rodriguez, approached with professional sympathy. Mr. Chen, I'm Maria Rodriguez, senior building inspector. I'm afraid we have some issues to discuss. What kind of issues? Sarah asked, though her voice suggested she already knew the answer would be expensive. Unpermitted demolition. For starters, Rodriguez said, consulting her clipboard. But more importantly, we've identified potential environmental concerns. Marcus felt the ground shifting beneath his feet. Your property backs up to the Central Arizona Project Canal, Rodriguez explained. Any major excavation or filling within 200 feet requires extensive environmental review. We're talking soil samples, groundwater testing, impact studies. The whole process could take 6 to 8 weeks. 8 weeks. Jake appeared from the backyard, concrete dust in his hair, his face flushed with heat and frustration. We're not building a nuclear plant, we're filling in a swimming pool. A swimming pool that's been leaching chlorinated water into the desert soil for 15 years. Karen interjected smoothly. Who knows what kind of contamination we're dealing with? Marcus stared at her. You can't be serious. Oh, I'm very serious. Karen's folder was thick with printouts and official forms. I've done my homework, Marcus. Environmental Protection Agency guidelines, state regulations, county ordinances. You've violated at least a dozen statutes. And the penalties. Sarah's voice was barely above a whisper. Rodriguez looked uncomfortable. Well, unpermitted demolition carries fines up to $10,000. Environmental violations could run significantly higher, depending on what we find in the soil tests. This is insane, Jake said. It's our pool in our backyard. Actually, Karen said, producing another document from her folder. I've filed a complaint with the HOA as well. Turns out there's a provision in our neighborhood covenants about maintaining property values and community standards. The board is meeting tomorrow night to discuss a cease and desist order. Marcus felt like he was drowning in paperwork and bureaucracy. How long have you been planning this? Karen's smile was arctic. I've been preparing for irresponsible neighbors since the day I moved into this community. You'd be amazed what you can accomplish with a little organization and civic responsibility, Mrs. Whitfield, Rodriguez said diplomatically. While I appreciate your thoroughness, I need to complete my inspection before any enforcement actions can be taken. Of course, Karen said. I'll just wait over here while you document all the violations. As Rodriguez returned to her measuring and photographing, Sarah pulled Marcus aside. How much money do we have in savings? About $8,000, Marcus said. Why? Because I think we're going to need a lawyer. A good one. Jake joined them, lowering his voice. Dad, there's something else. While you were gone, I kept working on the pool. I found something. Marcus felt cold despite the desert heat. What kind of something? Not here. Jake glanced toward Karen, who was pretending to examine her manicure while obviously eavesdropping. Tonight, after she goes home, the building inspector worked for another hour, taking soil samples from around the pool area, measuring distances to property lines, and documenting every crack in the concrete. Karen hovered nearby like a shark scenting blood, occasionally offering helpful observations about property values and community standards. Finally, Rodriguez packed up her equipment and approached the family. "Mr. Chen, I'm going to need you to cease all work on this project until we complete our review. That means no more demolition, no filling, nothing." "How long?" Marcus asked. "Could be weeks, could be months, depending on what the soil tests show." Rodriguez handed him a thick packet of papers. "These are the violation notices and the procedures. For requesting permits retroactively, you'll want to get started on the paperwork as soon as possible." As the inspector drove away, Karen lingered in their driveway like she was savoring her victory. "You know, Marcus," she said conversationally, "this all could have been avoided if you'd just been reasonable, if you'd talked to the community, before making unilateral decisions that affect all of us, affect all of you." "How?" Sarah snapped, her patience finally exhausted. "Property values, for one thing. Community standards. The aesthetic integrity of the neighborhood." Karen ticked, off points on her perfectly manicured fingers. "Plus, that pool has sentimental value for dozens of families. You can't just erase memories because you're having trouble coping." Marcus took a step toward Karen, and she immediately stepped back, pulling out her phone. "I wouldn't if I were you," she said. "I already have you on video threatening me once. Today, Sheriff Alvarez was very interested in establishing a pattern of aggressive behavior." "Dad," Jake warned quietly. Marcus forced himself to relax, though his hands remained clenched at his sides. "What do you want, Karen? I want you to abandon this destructive project and restore the pool to its original condition," she said. "I want you to apologize to the community for your reckless behavior. And I want assurance that you'll consult with your neighbors before making any major property modifications in the future. And if I don't," Karen's smile could have cut glass, "then I'll see you in court. Environmental violations, HOA violations, criminal damage to property. By the time I'm done, you'll be lucky if you can afford to keep living in this neighborhood." She turned and walked toward her house, her expensive workout clothes pristine despite the afternoon heat. At her front door, she paused and called back, "Oh, and Marcus, you might want to think carefully before you start digging around that pool again. Sometimes when you disturb old ground, you find things you weren't looking for." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. Sarah noticed his reaction immediately. "What was that about?" she asked as Karen disappeared into her house. Marcus stared at the half-destroyed pool, at the jagged concrete and exposed rebar that looked like broken bones in the afternoon light. "I don't know," he said, but his voice shook slightly. That night, after Sarah had gone to bed exhausted from her hospital shift and the day's drama, Marcus and Jake sat on the back patio with beers and the kind of heavy silence that comes after a day when everything goes wrong. "So what did you find?" Marcus asked finally. Jake set down his beer and disappeared into the garage, returning with a small plastic evidence bag, the kind Sarah brewed. The backhoe had been working for 3 hours. When it found the first bone, Marcus saw the operator's face change, saw him suddenly cut the engine and climb down from his cab to examine something in the bucket's teeth. The man's weathered features went pale as he waved Rodriguez over, speaking in urgent whispers while pointing at what looked like a fragment of white ceramic. But Marcus knew it wasn't ceramic. "Oh my God," Sarah breathed beside him, her medical training allowing her to recognize what the others were still trying to understand. Karen Whitfield had gone very still. The triumphant energy that had carried her through the morning had drained away, replaced by something that looked almost like panic. She pulled out her phone, fingers trembling slightly as she dialed. "Need to speak to City Attorney Davidson," she said, her voice pitched lower than usual. "It's Karen Whitfield. We have a situation at the Chen property, a big situation." Rodriguez was on her radio now, her voice carrying across the yard in fragments. ... "Need the coroner ... possible human remains ... secure the scene ... Within minutes, the suburban street transformed into something from a crime drama. Sheriff's deputies arrived first, their cars blocking both ends of the street. Then came the coroner's van, followed by a forensics team in white coveralls. Yellow tape went up around the entire backyard, turning Marcus and Sarah into spectators at the excavation of their own property. Detective Ray Castellanos was the kind of cop who looked like he'd been carved from desert, stone-weathered, permanent, unimpressed by the heat or the chaos. He'd worked homicide in Phoenix for 20 years, and Marcus could see in his eyes that this wasn't his first backyard excavation. Mr. Chen Castellanos said, his voice gravelly from years of cigarettes. He'd finally quit. "I understand you were trying to fill in this pool. That's right." Marcus felt like he was speaking through cotton. "My daughter used to swim here. She died 3 months ago. Car accident. I couldn't look at it anymore." Castellanos nodded, the kind of gesture that didn't commit to sympathy or suspicion. "And you started this demolition when this morning, yesterday morning. I mean, the timeline already felt blurred, like the last 24 hours had happened to someone else. Find anything unusual during your work?" Marcus glanced at Jake, who was standing near the garage, still holding the evidence bag with Jessica Martinez's bracelet. They'd hidden it when the inspectors arrived, some instinct warning them to keep their discovery quiet until they understood what they were dealing with. "Just old concrete and rebar," Marcus said, the lie tasting bitter in his mouth. Castellanos' eyes lingered on Marcus's face for a moment longer than comfortable, then moved to Karen, who was pacing near the property line like a caged animal. "Mrs. Whitfield, I understand you were the one who called in the environmental concerns." That's right, Karen's voice had lost its earlier confidence. "I was just trying to protect the neighborhood from potential contamination. I had no idea. I mean, nobody could have predicted, double quotes, predicted what." Karen gestured helplessly to the excavation site, where the forensics team was now carefully sifting through soil with brushes and small tools. "This, whatever this is," Castellanos made a note in his pad. "How long have you lived in the neighborhood, Mrs. Whitfield?" 15 years, since 2010. The answer came out too quickly, too defensive. 2010, Castellanos repeated. Same year, Jessica Martinez disappeared. The words hung in the desert air like a threat. Karen's face went through several color changes before settling on a sickly yellow. Yes. That was a terrible tragedy. Poor girl. Her parents were devastated. You knew the family. Not well, they lived down the street. Different social circles. Karen's hands were shaking now, and she clasped them behind her back to hide it. Marcus watched the exchange with growing certainty that Detective Castellanos wasn't just randomly mentioning Jessica's name. The investigation into her disappearance had never been closed, just relegated to the cold case files when leads dried up and the media moved on to fresher tragedies. Mr. Chen Castellanos said, turning back to Marcus, "I'm going to need you and your family to stay available for questioning. Don't leave town without checking with me first." "Are we suspects?" Sarah asked, her voice tight. "Right now, you're witnesses to the discovery of what appear to be human remains on your property. But investigations have a way of evolving." Castellanos handed Marcus a business card. "Call me if you remember anything else about your demolition work. Anything at all." As the detective walked away, Marcus noticed Karen trying to slip around the side of her house, presumably to avoid any more questions. But Castellanos had noticed too. "Mrs. Whitfield," he called out, "I'd like to continue our conversation down at the station, if you don't mind." "I'm sorry, but I have a very important HOA meeting tonight. I'm afraid that'll have to wait." Castellanos' tone was polite but firm. "This is a homicide investigation now." The word homicide seemed to echo across the neighborhood. Twitched in windows, neighbors emerged onto porches and driveways, and Marcus could see cell phones coming out as people started documenting the scene. Karen's face crumpled. Homicide. But it could be anything. Old indigenous burial ground, construction accident from when the houses were built. You can't assume, ma'am. I don't assume anything. But when we find human remains that have been deliberately concealed, we investigate them as potential homicides until proven otherwise. Castellanos gestured toward his patrol car. "Shall we?" Karen looked around desperately, as if searching for an escape route or an ally. Her gaze landed on Marcus, and for a moment, her mask of civic righteousness slipped completely. What he saw underneath was raw terror. "This is your fault," she hissed at him. If you'd just left things alone, none of this would have happened. None of what would have happened. Marcus stepped closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. What exactly are you afraid they're going to find down there, Karen? I don't know what you're talking about. Jessica Martinez's bracelet says otherwise. Karen's face went white. How do you? She caught herself, glancing around to see if anyone had overheard. You don't know what you're dealing with. Then tell me. Mr. Chen Castellanos interrupted, appearing at Marcus's shoulder. I think you and Mrs. Whitfield should save your conversation for when we're all at the station. All of us. Sarah asked. All of you, Castellanos confirmed. This is going to be a long night. The ride to the sheriff's station was surreal. Marcus found himself in the back of a patrol car for the second time in 2 days, but this time Sarah and Jake were in the car behind him, and Karen Whitfield was in a third car, staring out the window with the hollow expression of someone whose carefully constructed world was collapsing, the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office. At night was a fluorescent-lit maze of cubicles and interview rooms that smelled like burnt coffee and bureaucracy. Marcus was led to a small room with gray walls and a metal table, where he waited for 4 minutes before Castellanos appeared with a file folder and a cup of coffee that looked like it had been brewing since the Clinton administration. Sorry for the wait, Castellanos said, settling into the chair across from Marcus. Crime scenes take time to process properly. Have you found ... more? We found what appears to be a complete skeleton, approximately 5.5 feet tall, along with some personal effects, jewelry, clothing fragments. What looks like a cell phone from around 2010, Castellanos opened his folder and pulled out a photograph. Recognize this. The photo showed a tarnished gold bracelet with an engraved nameplate. Jessica M., 1995 to 2010. Marcus's mouth went dry. That looks like the bracelet we found. The bracelet you found? Castellanos' voice sharpened. I thought you said you didn't find anything unusual. The interview room suddenly felt very small. Marcus realized he'd walked into the trap of his own making, and the detective's patient demeanor was just professional technique. I, Jake, found it yesterday, while I was in jail. We were going to turn it in, but then all the inspectors showed up, and everything happened so fast. Where is this bracelet now? At home, in the garage. Jake has it. Castellanos made a note. Mr. Chen, I need you to understand something. Withholding evidence in a homicide investigation is a felony. Lying to a police officer during said investigation is also a felony. I'm giving you one chance to tell me everything you know about what's been buried under your pool. Marcus felt sweat beading on his forehead, despite the aggressive air conditioning. I swear to you, detective, I had no idea there was anything down there. I just wanted to fill in the pool because it reminded me too much of Emma. Tell me about Jessica Martinez. I barely knew her. Then one day, she was just ... gone. The official report says she was a runaway. That's what everyone said, but it never made sense. Jessica wasn't the type to run away. She was close to her parents, did well in school, had plans for college. Castellanos leaned back in his chair. What did you think happened to her, Marcus? Was quiet for a long moment, remembering there were rumors. Stories about her getting involved with older kids, maybe getting into drugs or something. But I always thought, he trailed off. You always thought what? I always thought someone... Marcus didn't sleep that night. He sat at his kitchen table until dawn, staring out at the crime scene that used to be his backyard, watching the forensics team work under floodlights. They moved with methodical precision, photographing and cataloging every fragment of bone, every scrap of fabric, every piece of evidence that had been hidden beneath his family's swimming pool for 15 years. At 6 a.m., his phone rang. The caller ID showed a number he didn't recognize. Mr. Chen, this is Elena Martinez, Jessica's mother. Marcus felt his chest tighten. Mrs. Martinez, I'm so sorry, don't. Her voice was steady but brittle, like glass under pressure. I need to see you today. There are things you need to know about what happened to my daughter. They met at a small cafe near the interstate, the kind of place where truckers and insomniacs gathered over coffee that could strip paint. Elena Martinez was smaller than Marcus remembered, her dark hair now streaked with silver, her face lined with 15 years of unanswered questions. I never believed she ran away, Elena said without preamble, wrapping her hands around her coffee cup like it was an anchor. Jessica was planning to study marine biology at ASU. She had a summer job lined up at the aquarium. She was excited about her future. "What do you think happened?" Elena's laugh was bitter. "I think my daughter found out something she wasn't supposed to know, and I think Karen Whitfield killed her for it." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. "You think Karen murdered Jessica?" "I know she did." Elena reached into her purse and pulled out a manila envelope. "I've been investigating my daughter's disappearance for 15 years. The police gave up after 6 months, said she was just another runaway teenager. But I never stopped looking." She opened the envelope and spread photographs across the small table. They showed Karen Whitfield at various ages, high school yearbook photos, college pictures, wedding shots. But it was the newspaper clipping that made Marcus's blood run cold. "Karen Whitfield, Karen Mitchell," Elena said. "Graduated from Chandler High School in 1995. Want to know what she did her senior year?" Marcus stared at the yellowed newspaper. Headline: Local teen dies in apparent drowning accident. The accompanying photo showed a young man named David Chunno, relation to Marcus, who had drowned during a graduation party at a Tempe lake. David was Karen's boyfriend, Elena continued. According to witnesses, they'd been arguing all night. David was threatening to tell people something about Karen, something that would ruin her reputation. 2 hours later, he was found floating face down in the lake. That could be a coincidence, could be. Elena pulled out another clipping. But then there's Michael Torres. Her college roommate's boyfriend at ASU died in a hiking accident in 2003 after threatening to expose Karen for cheating on her graduate thesis. More clippings followed, more deaths, stretching back 20 years, all ruled accidental, all involving people who had threatened to expose Karen's secrets. "This is insane," Marcus said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Jessica found out about David Chen's death," Elena said. "She was doing a genealogy project for school, tracing local families through public records. She discovered that Karen had lied about her background, about where she came from, about who she really was. How do you know all this?" Elena's smile was sad because Jessica called me the night before she disappeared. She was excited, said she'd found something important for her project. She wanted to show me when she got home from the pool party at your house. Marcus felt the world tilt slightly. Pool party, July 15th, 2010. Emma's birthday party. Jessica was invited, along with half the kids in the neighborhood. The memory came flooding back on his 11th birthday. Their backyard full of squealing kids, Sarah frantically serving cake and ice cream, while Marcus manned the grill. And yes, Jessica Martinez had been there, quiet and polite, helping Emma. Opened presents, while the other kids splashed in the pool. Karen was there too, Marcus said slowly. She volunteered to help supervise the kids while Sarah and I dealt with the food. Elena nodded grimly. Jessica never came home that night. Karen called the next morning to say Jessica had felt sick and asked to be driven home early, but I never saw her. That was the last time anyone saw my daughter alive. Marcus stared at the photographs spread across the table, seeing Karen's face through 15 years of carefully constructed lies. "Why didn't you take this to the police?" "I tried. Detective Morrison, he's retired now, said it was all circumstantial. Coincidences without a body or concrete evidence. There was nothing they could do." Elena's voice broke slightly. "But now there's a body." Marcus's phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. The cafe had a small TV mounted in the corner, tuned to a morning talk show. Marcus asked the waitress to change the channel, and suddenly Karen Whitfield's face filled the screen. Double quotes, ... "A tragic situation that has shocked our entire community," Karen was saying into a reporter's microphone. She stood on her front lawn, perfectly dressed and made up despite the early hour, every inch the concerned neighbor. "The Chen family has been going through a terrible ordeal since losing their daughter, and I'm afraid Marcus's grief may have driven him to ... extreme measures." "What kind of extreme measures?" the reporter asked. "Well, I can't discuss an ongoing investigation, but I will say that I've been concerned about his mental state for months. The violent outbursts, the destruction of property, the threats." Karen dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, though Marcus couldn't see any actual tears. "I just pray that the authorities get to the bottom of this terrible tragedy." "Are you suggesting Mr. Chen is responsible for the remains found in his backyard?" "I'm not suggesting anything, Karen," said carefully. "I'm just saying that grief can make people do unthinkable things. And sometimes when someone is trying to cover up their actions, they might try to implicate innocent neighbors." Marcus felt rage building in his chest like a pressure cooker. "She's setting me up." Alina was already gathering her photographs. "We need to get to Detective Castellanos today, before Karen can spin this any further." But as they walked toward the cafe exit, Marcus's phone rang again. This time, it was Castellanos himself. "Mr. Chen, I need you to come to the station. Immediately. What's wrong?" "We've made an arrest in the Jessica Martinez case." Marcus felt relief flood through him. "You got Karen?" "No, Mr. Chen. We got you." The world seemed to stop. Through the cafe window, Marcus could see two sheriffs, deputies walking toward the entrance, their hands resting casually on their service weapons. "There's been a mistake," Marcus said into the phone. "Forensics found your fingerprints on the victim's jewelry, along with trace DNA evidence," Castellanos said. "Combined with your recent violent behavior and your obvious knowledge of the burial site, we have probable cause for arrest." "That's impossible. I never touched." Marcus stopped remembering. The bracelet. Jake had handed him the bracelet in the evidence bag, and he'd held it up to the light, examining the engraving. Alina grabbed his arm. "They're setting you up," she whispered urgently. "Karen must have planted evidence, contaminated the scene somehow." The deputies entered the cafe, their eyes scanning the room until they found Marcus. "Mr. Chen, Maricopa, County Sheriff's Office. Please stand up and place your hands behind your back." "This is a mistake," Marcus said, but he complied. Around the cafe, other customers were pulling out their phones, recording as the handcuffs clicked into place. "You have the right to remain silent," the deputy began, but Marcus wasn't listening. He was staring through the window at Karen Whitfield's house, visible in the distance, where he could see a figure watching from an upstairs window. Even from this distance, he could see her smile. Alina Martinez stepped forward as the deputies prepared to lead Marcus away. "Detective Castellanos needs to see this," she said urgently, holding up her manila envelope. "This woman has been killing people for 20 years. "Ma'am, you'll need to make an appointment," one of the deputies said. "This is evidence in a murder case. Ma'am, please step back." As they guided Marcus toward their patrol car, Alina called out, "I won't let her get away with this. Jessica deserves justice." Marcus looked back to see Alina Martinez standing alone in the cafe parking lot, clutching her photographs and newspaper clippings, the only person who believed in his innocence. But would it be enough? The ride to the jail was a blur of media, vans, and curious neighbors. Marcus saw his own house as they drove past, still wrapped in crime scene tape, still crawling with investigators, still the center of a story that was spiraling completely out of his control. His phone, which the deputies had allowed him to keep until they reached the station, buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "You should have left the pool alone. Some secrets are worth killing for." Marcus stared at the message, his blood running cold. Karen wasn't just covering up Jessica's murder, she was actively framing him for it. And with his fingerprints on the evidence and his DNA somehow contaminating the crime scene, she might actually succeed. The patrol car pulled into the sheriff's station parking lot, and Marcus realized with growing horror that his nightmare, it was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. Because if Karen Whitfield had successfully murdered people for 20 years without being